want to jump right into our morning presentation, or our morning conversation. And that is with Richard Onizuka. You want to come on up, Richard? And we'll get started. Richard is the CEO of the Washington Health Plan Finder, or Health Benefit Exchange. And prior to that, the director, well, a number of names of the Healthcare Authority, but had the title of Director of Healthcare Policy. And thank you, sir. I know you got other stuff to do, but I appreciate you being here.
Appreciate being here, DJ. So are we going to talk about, is Percy Harvin going to play on Saturday?
I had nothing else on my mind, frankly. Can't wait for that game, 1:30. So let's start maybe at the top. I know you put out some data, your agency put out data yesterday in terms of the latest enrollment numbers. I know you brought some slides, so maybe we could move to those slides here. And as we pull those up, tell us about how it's going and tell us about the numbers.
So people have seen, a lot of times seen the numbers that we've been pushing out, and we've been trying to push out weekly numbers if we can, and then more deeper drill down monthly numbers on enrollment. But before I start, let me say a couple things if I can. Happy New Year, everybody. I hope everybody is ready for the new year. The legislative session, as you said, starts next week. It's hard for us to believe that we're here now on January 8th. I mean, we spent 2.5 years working on this, shooting for October 1. And October 1 has come. We're now past, once we got to October 1, we went to January 1 as a key target date, December 23rd around enrollment. And it's hard to believe that that's here also. So it's been quite an accomplishment. I want to say a couple things about that if I can.
Please.
You know, I think we've done pretty well in terms of enrollment numbers. We know we have challenges, and we're going to talk about those, I assume, this morning. I do want to say that you know, this is a state effort, and this is an effort that everybody here in this room participated in, contributed to, had a role in achieving the success that we have in Washington State. It starts from the beginning, from our political leadership, all the way to our state agency partners, to the key carrier partners, to our stakeholder community. Everybody's participated in this. So the success that the exchange has had here in Washington State is a reflection of the active contributions of everybody in the community, the healthcare community in Washington State. So I want to say that, first of all, is that everybody's participated in that, and everybody should enjoy in the success that we've had in the exchange in Washington State. Second thing I want to say is we absolutely at the exchange understand what was at stake here in this process. A lot of folks here, I see, you know, in case you haven't noticed, I have a few gray hairs, and I try to keep it short so you can't see it as much, but I have a few gray hairs.
At least you have hair.
On me. Yeah. I have a few gray hairs on me, so I've been, as a lot of people here have been in this business for a long time and been in healthcare for a long time. And so we absolutely knew what was at stake in terms of implementing the exchange. So we knew that this was something that doesn't come around very often, and that was an opportunity of our lifetime to be able to get health insurance to the masses. And we knew and the bottom line is getting health insurance to the people of Washington State. So we knew that was a critical thing, and for us, a failure was not an option. So with that, let me talk a little bit about our numbers. We have been, from the very first day we opened in October 1st, we have seen tremendous volumes, and people are aware of that. People know that the call center has had challenges in terms of managing the type of volume that we have. But you see the numbers here around unique visitors and accounts created. Our website, as you all probably know, is built in a way that you can browse anonymously. You don't have to create an account to be able to start the process. And that's one thing that really helped us, I think, get the interest that we got. Because we had a lot of folks looking at the site the first few days. And obviously you know that we went down the first couple days, and starting from about Thursday, the third day, we were working pretty well from then. But we have over 300,000 accounts that have been created. And so that's a lot of traffic and a lot of volume on our website. Not everybody will end up being a enrollee. A lot of folks, a lot of accounts. We looked at the different accounts. There's an account by hot sauce someplace in the legislative building. And so a lot of people were sort of just creating accounts just to see the process, just to drive the wheel, to kick the tires a little bit. So we knew that that was going to be an issue around there, and people were going to be interested in that.
People in the legislature were watching closely?
Oh, yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah.
And we knew that there was lots of interest from national reporters. I think a lot of the early traffic was reporters from all over the place. These are our metrics as of January 2nd. So we've had a regular cadence of weekly metrics, and so we try to release them around Monday or Tuesday of the previous week. They cover usually the up to Thursday of the previous week, so that we can match that with Medicaid, with the HCA, so that we have the same numbers and we're producing the same numbers if we can. So these are the metrics as of January 2nd of last week. We will also, and we're currently working on our December enrollment numbers. So you've seen us produce an enrollment summary for October and November, where we have a little bit more of a drill down in terms of what plans people are selecting and those types of things. But on the high level, the QHP enrollments to date are 71,000, and that's actually people that have been enrolled and paid, and those are people that are actually enrolled. We do have a complication around the fact that there are still some people working their way through that tried before the deadline date, and we're still going to try to get as many of those people through, as long as we can do that before January 15th. So that number may increase for the January 1st enrollment. But 71,000 current enrollments. When you combine it with Medicaid and the new enrollments in Medicaid and the new enrollments in Medicaid, it's almost 250,000. And so we're very pleased with that number. I think HCA will tell you, and I know you're going to hear from Dorothy and Mary Ann later today, that I think HCA will tell you that they're pleased with their numbers and they've hit their targets, especially around the new, I think that's 120,000 that are newly enrolled adults. And I think it's
Newly
about
eligible.
55,000 or so that are the folks that are previously eligible that hadn't been there before, the welcome mat, as we call them. So we're very pleased about that. And then there's also a category of folks that have completed an application but haven't paid, and those are the ones that are needing to pay, and there's another 70,000 people of those. We think some of those will turn into actual enrollments, although we also believe that because of some of the issues that we've had with our system, some of those went to the private market in order to get coverage by January 1st. Some of the things that we've seen and this is an early look at some of the trends that we saw in December. This will be part of the enrollment report that we'll produce probably around next week sometime, is that about 23%, about a fifth or so of the QHP enrollments are people that aren't even receiving any tax credits. Those are the folks that are over 400% of federal poverty level. They're not getting any subsidies at all, but they feel like they see and they shop in the exchange and see that that's a better deal than the outside market, or a good deal as compared to the outside market. We're always concerned about the demographics. And so you see about a fifth of the enrollments are between ages 18 and 34. That's a key demographic for us. And I'll mention some of the things that we're doing to try to reach that group. About 35% are the age 55 to 64. Those are the higher age demographics. And then what we see is that most people are choosing silver plans. And that's not surprising, given that you have to choose a silver plan to qualify for the cost sharing reductions under 250% of federal poverty level. So we expected the silver plans to be the highest chosen of the plans that we see. The QHP enrollments are increasing. What we started off in October, and we expected this. We kept trying to caution people about not making too much of the early numbers, because we expected to see this upward trend around the QHP numbers. Because if you shopped in October, it wasn't going to start until January, and you didn't have to pay. If something was going to start in January, when would most people pay for it? Probably December 31st. And so that's what most people did, is push their payments to December. And that's what we saw in terms of the enrollment. So we see much more of the enrollments reflecting now the QHPs.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
So, when we first talked about you joining us in September or so, we had no idea how this would go, right?
We didn't.
And we've known each other for a number of years now, and I have provided some comments to you that sometimes were helpful, and sometimes maybe not so helpful. But in reflecting on this conversation in the last week, I am struck by something I said in one of our 5 things some months ago, which was, if we get through this enrollment period unscathed, you might be the CEO of the year. And in light of the fact that Oregon, which is a poster child for reform, in some cases can't even get a website functioning, the federal government is better, but maybe not yet well in terms of the exchanges. And you know, the country has to look at a place like Kentucky to find anything comparable to what you've accomplished here. I just, you know, I don't speak on behalf of the healthcare industry, but as one person in healthcare, I'm very proud of the work that you've done at the Exchange. I'm very proud of the work that the Exchange Board has done, and I alone, at least, will applaud you. So thank you very much for your work.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. And,
So I'm not the only one. So.
And that's where I say it takes a village.
Yeah.
Everybody here participated in that. Everybody here contributed to that. We had great political leadership to start this off. You know, and people, now that everybody has some experience, people have started to ask, so what was different, what helped, and getting out in front very early was really, really helpful.
Yeah. So what keeps you up at night now? I mean, we'll maybe get into some of the weeds, but what's coming on the disaster horizon? What's in the headlines next week?
Oh, God. So there's a lot of things. I mean, the call center continues to keep us up at night in terms of managing the volume of the call center. You know, we spent so much energy as a developmental startup and knowing that we're going to go live in October. What happened after October 1 was transitioning our thinking to now being a business and now being in operations and now and being a 24-hour business and having customers. And so being able to manage and being able to provide and enhance the customer experience is what keeps all of us up at night in terms of, we know that the call center's been a frustration. We know that there's still error codes that we're throwing. There's complications. You know, how do we continue to enhance the ability for customers to get through the system, to be able to get through it? We do hear stories of people being able to get through in 15, 20 minutes and complete the application. But we also hear the horror stories of people, you know, trying and trying and trying. So there's still continue that continues to keep us up at night. You know, the deadlines continue to challenge us. So the first deadline was October 1st, then we had the December 23rd deadline, and we know that we've had people that are still in the process that started before December 23rd, and we're trying to get those people through before January 15th. March 31st is the deadline. We expect the push that we saw at the end of December, we expect that to happen again in March, and being able to get everybody through by the end of the open enrollment period. Our demographics, trying to get a good mix of our demographics and people getting that. You know, the issue now that we're dealing with today is trying to make sure that we get the accurate data to the carriers on enrollment information and the sort of the back office kinds of services to be able to make sure that happens. We have a lot of things that we know are on our list in terms of things that we want to enhance for the customer experience. But those are the things that sort of keep me up today, and there'll be different things next week.
I know this is looking way too far ahead, but you're 3 months into a 6-month open enrollment period. Next year's open enrollment period runs from October 15 to December 7th. It's pretty narrow, as I understand it.
So I think it's October. I think the feds have proposed moving it to November.
Even better.
Yeah.
So even more narrow.
November to January, I think, is what they're proposing. We would prefer it to stay October to December, because if you have open enrollment that runs into January, then you get into all sorts of complications around January 1st enrollment.
But have we learned through the first 3 months that it's probably a safe bet to have a relatively wide open enrollment period? I mean, even if it's just 45 days in November and December versus 45 days in October and November, it's not a lot of time compared to the 90 days we've gone through and we're only halfway through.
Yeah.
I mean, would your recommendation to policymakers be to expand that out?
I would prefer to keep it as a 2 to 3 month, 2.5 month open enrollment period, just to be able to concentrate the activity and to shoot for the activity around that period of time.
Yeah.
So part of the complication that we have with the 6-month open enrollment period is we're enrolling people now for February coverage. So part of the messaging got real difficult in terms of the December 23rd deadline. So we had to try to distinguish the December 23rd deadline was just for January 1st enrollment. It doesn't mean that the open enrollment period is ending. So that message got a little bit confusing for people sometimes. I think because there's so much all over the place for us, for carriers, things like that, I think the preference would be to keep it as a 2.5 month open enrollment period to be able to make sure that gets done there and then be able to get all the rest of the work done for the rest of the year.
So there's been some pretty good reporting, particularly in the Oregonian, which has been great on Cover Oregon. Uh, and there's been some reporting about how the Washington Health Plan Finder was purposely very narrow in its scope of work, particularly compared to a state like Oregon, which tried to do it all and trumpeted that they were trying to do it all. Walk us through the politics of that, or the thinking initially that kept you focused on what was achievable rather than what might be ideal.
Yeah. So that's a really good question. So when we first thought about the project and what we had to do, I mean, every project you've got to manage scale, scope, and resources. In this project, fortunately, what we had is resources. The federal government provided resources around that. The difference in this project was you had a hard deadline. You had a hard schedule. And so in order to make that hard schedule, you have to manage scope. It's just, it's just an equation that everybody who's managed a big project understands. That if you have a hard deadline, you have to manage scope. So we were very clear about that at the beginning. We spent a lot of time really understanding what that meant. We spent a lot of time understanding how do we clarify that. And we wanted to make sure that, again, consistent with my opening comments, that was truly what our goal was, to just be able to open on October 1st. And everybody that we talked with, the board, all agree that that was the major priority, is to make sure that we're going to meet that deadline. So in order to do that, you just really have to manage scope. And all through the project, we looked at things that, it got clear, because part of the other challenge was guidelines and requirements were slow coming out of the federal government. So a lot of time, and we've used the metaphor of flying the plane as you build it, and that's basically what we were doing. And so a lot of times, I mean, we got the last set of federal guidance on August 28th, and for October 1 enrollment. And there's a lot of things that we weren't able to meet based on that. So we had to make lots of decisions as things changed, and we knew that that was going to be the case, so we had to build in some capacity to be able to do that. The board was consistent about that. The legislature was great about that. I mean, they understood that message. They, we understand the expectations that people had for this to be the best it could be. And we share those expectations. But we also knew that we had to be able to manage it, to be able to get it done in October 1st.
So let me see if you'll walk through an alligator-filled swamp with me for a second. We almost weren't sitting here. In other words, August and the insurance commissioner's decision to only allow certain plans on made some news and got some people fired up politically. You have the exchange, you have a statutorily created insurance commissioner office, you have the governor, you have the legislature. Whose job is it, or rather, let me ask it differently. What would your recommendations be to the governor to streamline that regulatory, and recommendations to the legislature? What would your recommendations be to streamline that process so that there was greater accountability in getting plans through to the market, and which were more coherent with the Medicaid regulations as well? Because part of the problem was that the standard set by the Healthcare Authority for Medicaid plans was a little different than the insurance commissioner's plan for commercial market, for commercial plans.
The challenge of this, when I said early on that we had to have really good collaboration and coordination with our state agency partners, and that's part of the challenge of this. I mean, I remember having early conversations with Jonathan Seib in the governor's office when we were talking about the original legislation for the bill, for the exchange and things like that around. So we would have conversations and say, we're not sure if the feds really understood what they gave to us as states in terms of the challenge that we had as states to be able to implement this thing. I think part of what benefits us here in Washington is that we did have collaboration, and we had already had working relationships with among the state agencies. So I've been in the health policy world for a few years, talked to other states, and when you go to other states, it's always, when you've seen one state, you've seen one state. And when I've been to states where the public employees agency doesn't talk to the Medicaid agency very much, and there's not a whole lot of coordination and collaboration. Washington State has always done that in terms of collaboration among the agencies, collaboration among the medical directors, things like that. There's always a division of responsibilities, and I think everybody knew what their responsibilities were. I think what we did early on, and the governor's office did a really good job of pulling all the parties together to say, okay, so we do have different responsibilities in this, but we have a shared goal and make sure that this got implemented.
But whose responsibility is it to make sure that we don't have what was almost a debacle? Well, I would call it almost a debacle with the regulatory process where there was clearly some frustration on the part of the exchange board members. Whose responsibility is it to streamline that regulatory process so that we do have a fully functioning shop, for instance, in 20X years from now?
Hopefully 2015.
Yeah.
A robust state shop in 2015.
Yeah. And more plan options on the individual market if plans choose.
Right. So I'm not sure how you would change the regulatory process for that. There's a lot of, I think that the Insurance Commissioner's Office did what they were supposed to do, and that's make sure that they're protecting consumers in terms of the approval of carriers.
Yeah.
So it turned out that in the original run-through of that, there was less carriers than we would optimally like to have. I think the process worked in the sense of there's active discussions between the Commissioner's Office and the Exchange Board. The Exchange Board expressed their interest in having more choice and more options for consumers. But I think that you have to also consider the consumer protection aspects of that too. So I think everybody did their jobs and did what they were supposed to do, and eventually it ended up to be a good result.
I don't think any of the alligators in that political swamp got him. I think he handled that well. We've got a couple of microphones here set up for folks who'd like to come and ask Richard questions. So please don't be shy. You can just stand and I'll call on you when you're up there. But I know Bob Nakahara, your CFO, often will comment on what consolidation might look like in the future. Why have 14 different state-based exchanges and a number of 36 federally operated or hybrid exchanges? Oregon could use an exchange. I bet you've given some thought about, have you picked up the phone and said, hey, we could help you out? Or have you avoided?
I have enough on my plate.
Yeah?
I have enough on my plate.
Is that a longer term, is consolidation of state exchanges a longer term visionary question at the exchange?
We want to be the best exchange we can be for Washington, for the people of Washington, first of all. If it means that the other states want to talk to us about, we've consulted with other states. All the states talk to each other. All the state-based exchanges talk to each other. So Idaho right now is going through procurement for their system integrator. We've talked to them about some of the lessons learned that we've had. I've talked to some of the folks in Oregon. We actually had several months ago, before Go Live, we actually had what we call the border meeting with Oregon exchange folks. So we brought our staff, key members of our staff, key members of their staff. We met sort of halfway and sort of talked about experiences and things like that. Mm-hmm. Every state's going to operate theirs a little bit different. Every state wants to operate it the best way that fits their population. Mm-hmm. So there's always going to be a challenge around mixing markets and mixing market rules and things like that around trying to have a multi-state exchange. But I think there's some interest in that. There's at least some discussions around that. What we've seen is we have shared a lot of the other Deloitte states. Our system integrator is Deloitte. Connecticut, Rhode Island, Kentucky all have Deloitte. We have shared previously our code with Connecticut, and I think that then got shared with Rhode Island. Mm-hmm. So we share intellectual property and things like that. So we do try to combine. We shared marketing materials with other states. California's been very helpful with sharing their materials and stuff. So we do share a lot of stuff that we've worked on with other states.
Share with us the visioning process that the board's going through and the staff is supporting related to Exchange 2.0 or maybe Exchange 3.0, and particularly this notion of performance evaluations of plans or trying to identify standards that plans must meet in order to be on the exchange or otherwise be rejected. Tell us about what the thinking is there.
So the exchange, exchanges were created to deal with providing access to people. We all know that there's still some issues in the delivery system around cost and quality and things like that. There are a couple tools that the exchange has, mostly around the qualified health plans. So what do you certify as a QHP? And then within that qualification criteria, there's a criteria around quality improvement and how do carriers work on quality improvements and what do they engage around that. We also did get some authority from the legislature around a rating system for consumers. So how do we get consumers more engaged? How do we get consumers information to consumers so they can make really well-informed choices? So the board has spent a lot of time sort of looking at what their levers are, what their authority is in all those different areas. So we're in this process now of trying to define what are the 4 or 5 key areas the board is going to work for and approach around that, and then sort of what are the resources down to be able to bring into bear around trying to implement those. Mm-hmm. We're trying to also coordinate that with what's already out there in the private healthcare market and the public healthcare market. So we're working with the state agencies around the innovation grant that they're talking about today, that you'll hear about later today. And we're talking to the Alliance, the Puget Sound Health Alliance, about stuff that they're doing with their performance reporting. So we're trying to make sure that it's all leveraged because what we don't want is sort of one-offs all over the place. I think that's what drives providers crazy too, is having requirements from all different carriers or people that they contract with.
Yeah. Feel free to come up for questions. Don't be shy. You and your 600 closest friends. Tell me about what it was like as CEO in August when the board was very animated and there was a lot of headlines around plan approval from the OIC to be reviewed by the exchange and how the process went as the deadlines extended into September and appeals were filed. And what was that like as CEO, watching your board take on a political conversation?
Yeah, I thought the board did a great job. I was really proud of the board for taking that. They, when you talk about sort of the authority that they had, they didn't have a real clear authority around making any changes in that, but what they had is the public process and the ability to say this is what we wanted to achieve. And they used that very well, very effectively. Mm-hmm. And so I think they gave us authority to be able to push some deadlines, to be able to have a little bit more time. They really set the parameters of what they wanted to achieve around that. And so I think we all as staff liked the fact or agreed with the fact that this is their end goal of trying to get more choice to consumers. It was challenging for us. We had 4 special board meetings. And there's all sorts of legal requirements and logistical requirements about having special board meetings. So it was a real challenge for us.
Because you're a public agency.
Right? Yeah, because we have to comply with those public rules. So it was a real challenge to have 4 special board meetings in like a 2-week time, a 2-week time period. So it was a real challenge. But I think, the end result was a good outcome.
Yeah. So legislative session starts next week. It wasn't the case that a year ago that the Inslee administration was fully staffed, but it is now. What would your, I'll call it advice, what would your advice be to the governor and to the legislature as they consider the future of the insurance marketplace, both in the exchange and out?
Excuse me. So I think the governor's office has been very supportive about sort of how we're going to apply it. The governor's office, especially when we had the first couple of days of bumpy start, the governor's office I think did a great job in terms of setting people's expectations and calming people down to say it's still it's going to be okay. It's just give it a couple of days and we're able to right the ship a little bit. The immediate issue that the board, the governor's office is working on right now is board appointments. We've got 4 of our board members whose terms have expired, including our board chair. We'd like to get the board, as many of those folks reappointed as possible. I know they're working on that. We will have 1 replacement. One of our board members, Steve Apple, is retired and is a farmer in Eastern Washington, is going to spend time on his farm. He's been a great board member. We've had a really, really good board. I mean, this board has been well-formed, well-crafted, and works well together. So we've been really pleased with how the board has worked together. I think, going into this legislative session, and we've started talking with some of the legislators in the last couple of weeks or so, and we'll continue to do that. At this point, we don't need anything in terms of new legislation. So the key for us last year was the funding legislation for 2015. I think we're going to just sort of be able to watch, to see what's going to happen with things. We just need to continue to be able to improve the system that we built and be able to improve the customer service. So I don't think there's anything that we are asking right now from the legislature around that to be able to do that. We just are going to be able to do the same things that we're doing. We still, have said to them, just make sure you don't kind of add a whole bunch of stuff without the context of what our whole system needs to have. So it's really easy to listen to one constituency, so do this, without thinking about it in the whole picture.
So you were artful in dodging not giving advice to the governor. You don't have
I'm a psychologist, DJ, remember?
You don't have the same line of quasi-responsibility to the healthcare industry writ large. But a lot of plans make major bets on whether the exchange will work and business development as a result. A lot of providers have to make major strategic decisions about what the exchange looks like or how it may impact them. Sometimes there are lawsuits related to those questions. So give us your concluding thoughts in terms of advice to the industry, advice to providers and to plans and to people gathered here as they think about the exchange for 2014 and onward. What would you advise them to keep in mind? What should they be watching for? How should they approach the exchange? What should they be thinking about? Any advice or insight?
I think they should be thinking about things that they're already thinking about and continuing to move that forward. Delivery system reform, holding down costs. I think affordability is still going to be a key thing for consumers on the exchange. I mean, there's a lot of people that are getting subsidies, that are being able to afford healthcare because of the subsidies, but there's still a lot of people who are buying it without the subsidies. And if the cost of healthcare continues to grow, the subsidies will no longer be as helpful as they are today. So I think managing costs, managing quality, managing outcomes is still going to be critically important to carriers. I would like to see, and we mentioned this before, I'd love to see more carriers play on the shop. We're going to rebrand it as the Health Plan Finder business, because I think we can have a really robust business exchange, especially next year, especially in 2016 when we go to 100 employees in 2016. When you go to 100 employees, you cover 98% of the businesses in Washington State. So I think that could be a really robust opportunity for carriers. I want to see carriers participate in SHOP. We've already started having those conversations with folks. We are hopeful and optimistic that we'll get more participation in SHOP in 2015 and be able to have a statewide robust SHOP. So the challenge is still out there. I mean, we spent so much time concentrating on getting the exchange up. The things that still that ailed the delivery system, the healthcare system before, are still out there. There's still disalignment of the incentives in the healthcare industry. There are still lack of really good data to consumers. There's lack of really good information for consumers around cost of care, around quality of care, around total cost of care and things like that to consumers. So there's still lots of the challenges that were there before the exchange became the big news are still out there in the healthcare world. Yeah. And so I think as taking off my exchange hat as a healthcare policy person or a healthcare consumer, what I want is the industry to continue to work on reform and alignment of incentives and things like that.
Richard, thank you very much for all of your service and for joining us here today. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
It wasn't too bad.